The rain fell hard on the metal roof of the mining station. Zektar pressed his small furry face against the window, watching the water run down the glass. His amber eyes followed the strange creatures that walked on two legs through the storm. The humans moved differently than his people. They did not have the proud, straight backs of Vraxian warriors. Instead, they hunched their shoulders against the rain and hurried to find shelter. Zektar was young, even for a Vraxian cub. His naming ceremony had happened only 3 moon cycles ago. His father was Captain Morthok of the 3rd Defense Fleet. His mother served in the Warrior Council. They expected great things from their son. But right now, Zektar felt very small and very curious about these humans. The Vraxians had fought beside humans for 2 years now. The mining colony on Kepler 442b needed both species to work properly. Humans were good with machines and complex thinking. Vraxians were strong and brave in battle. Together, they could mine the rare metals that both civilizations needed. But the partnership was not easy. Most Vraxians thought humans were weak. Most humans found Vraxians too aggressive. A bright flash of lightning lit up the sky. Thunder crashed so loud that Zektar jumped back from the window. He had been watching from the corridor between the Vraxian quarters and the human living areas. His parents did not know he came here often. They would not approve of his interest in the strange aliens. "Hey there, little guy." Zektar spun around. A human male stood behind him, holding a cup of something that steamed in the cool air. The human had dark hair and kind eyes. Zektar recognized him as one of the engineers who worked on the big mining machines. "You look cold," the human said. "And wet. Want to come inside until the storm passes?" Zektar hesitated. His parents had taught him to be polite but careful around other species. But the thunder crashed again, and the human seemed friendly. The cub nodded slowly. The human smiled. "I'm Marcus Chen. What's your name?" "Zektar," the young Vraxian replied. His English was good. All Vraxian children learned human languages now. Marcus led him through a door into the human quarters. Zektar had never been inside before. Everything looked different from Vraxian spaces. Where Vraxian rooms had stone walls and metal decorations showing battle victories, human rooms had soft furniture and pictures of strange places. The air smelled like the hot drink Marcus carried. "This is my apartment," Marcus explained. "It's not much, but it's warm and dry." Zektar looked around with wide eyes. In one corner, he saw a flat black box connected to a screen. Wires ran to small rectangular objects that had many buttons. "What is that?" Zektar asked, pointing at the device. Marcus followed his gaze and smiled. "That's my PlayStation. It's a gaming system. You play games on it for fun." "Games?" Zektar tilted his head. Vraxians did not play games. They trained for war and practiced fighting skills. Fun was something warriors found in victory over enemies. Marcus sat down on his soft couch and picked up one of the rectangular controllers. The screen came alive with colors and sounds. "Here, let me show you." For the next hour, Zektar watched in amazement as Marcus controlled tiny warriors on the screen. The game was called something Marcus pronounced as strategy. Little soldiers moved across a map. They built structures, gathered resources, and fought battles against enemy armies. "How do you make them move?" Zektar asked. "With this controller. Each button does something different. Want to try?" Zektar's claws were not made for the small human buttons, but Marcus showed him how to hold the controller carefully. At first, the young Vraxian could only make his soldiers walk in circles, but his natural reflexes were faster than Marcus expected. Soon, Zektar was moving units around the map with growing confidence. "You're a natural," Marcus said, surprised. "Most people take days to learn these controls." The storm outside continued. But Zektar did not notice. He was completely focused on the screen. The strategy game fascinated him. It was like the war exercises his father practiced. But different. In Vraxian military tradition, battles were about honor and individual courage. But in this human game, success came from thinking ahead, managing resources, and coordinating many different types of units. "Why do these soldiers hide behind the hills?" Zektar asked. "It's called tactics," Marcus explained. If you attack from high ground, you have an advantage. If you attack from multiple directions at once, the enemy gets confused. If you cut off their supply lines, they run out of food and weapons. These concepts were new to Zektar. Vraxian warriors fought face to face with honor. Hiding was considered cowardly, but in the game, these tactics worked. They let smaller armies defeat larger ones through cleverness instead of just strength. Marcus showed him other games too. Racing games where drivers competed on different tracks. Puzzle games where players had to solve problems to advance. Fighting games where characters used special moves in combat. Each game taught different skills and ways of thinking. When the storm finally ended, Zektar did not want to leave. But the sun was setting, and his parents would expect him for the evening meal. "Can I come back tomorrow?" he asked hopefully. Marcus smiled. "Of course. I don't get many visitors here. It gets lonely sometimes." As Zektar walked back to the Vraxian quarters, his mind buzzed with new ideas. The humans had created these games for entertainment, but they taught real lessons about strategy, resource management, and problem solving. He wondered what would happen if Vraxian military commanders learned these human concepts. That night, during the family meal, Zektar's father complained about the latest defeat against the hegemony pirates. "They use dishonorable tactics," Captain Morthak growled. "They attack supply convoys instead of fighting our warships directly. They retreat when our forces advance, then strike from unexpected angles. It is not how true warriors fight." Zektar listened quietly, remembering the strategy games he had played. Maybe the pirates were not being dishonorable. Maybe they were just using different tactics. Maybe the Vraxians could learn something from human games about fighting smarter instead of just fighting harder. But he did not say anything. He was just a cub, and adults did not listen to cubs about military matters. Instead, he planned his next visit to Marcus's apartment. There were many more games to learn, and many more tactical concepts to explore. Outside, the stars came out over the mining colony. Neither Zektar nor Marcus knew that their friendship would change the course of galactic history. For now, they were just an engineer missing home, and a curious cub discovering that there were many different ways to think about war and victory. 6 months had passed since that first stormy night. Zektar now visited Marcus every day after his combat training. The human engineer had become like an uncle to the young Vraxian. Marcus taught him new games and answered endless questions about human military history. Zektar's gaming skills had grown beyond anything Marcus thought possible. The young Vraxian could now play the most complex strategy games with ease. His claws had adapted to the controllers through practice. More importantly, his mind had adapted to human ways of thinking about warfare. "Show me that move again," Zektar said, leaning forward on the couch. On the screen, Marcus was playing a game called Total War. Thousands of tiny soldiers moved across ancient battlefields. "This is called a pincer movement," Marcus explained. He moved 2 groups of cavalry around the sides of the enemy army, while his main force attacked from the front. You attack from 3 directions at once. The enemy doesn't know where to focus their defense. Zektar watched carefully. "But in real Vraxian combat, we charge straight at the enemy. My father says attacking from the side is cowardly. Different cultures have different ideas about honor," Marcus said gently. He had learned not to criticize Vraxian traditions directly. But in human history, generals who used tactics like this saved more of their soldiers' lives. Sometimes being clever keeps your people alive better than being brave. This made Zektar think. He had been reading human military history on Marcus's computer. Stories about generals like Sun Tzu, Alexander the Great, and Napoleon Bonaparte. These humans had won battles against much larger armies by using their brains instead of just their strength. "The hegemony pirates use tactics like this," Zektar said slowly. "They attack our supply ships instead of fighting our warships. They retreat when we advance, then hit us from behind. Our commanders call them cowards, but they keep winning." Marcus nodded. In human military thinking, the goal is to win with minimum losses. Honor matters, but keeping your people alive matters more. Zektar started a new game. This time, he chose to play as the defending army against a larger attacking force. Marcus watched in amazement as the young Vraxian used tactics that would never occur to most human players. Zektar used the terrain perfectly, hiding units behind forests and hills. He divided the enemy army by attacking their supply lines. He even used fake retreats to lure enemies into traps. "Where did you learn to do that?" Marcus asked. "I think about what the enemy expects me to do," Zektar explained. "Then I do something different. In this game, big armies usually win by attacking directly, so I make them think I'm weak in one place, but I'm really strong in another place." Marcus realized that Zektar was developing his own tactical philosophy. The young Vraxian combined his natural Vraxian courage with human strategic thinking. The result was something neither species had created before. Word about Zektar's gaming had spread through the Vraxian community on the mining station. Most adults thought it was a waste of time. Some even worried that human influence was making the cubs soft and weak, but a few younger Vraxian officers had started asking questions. Lieutenant Korthek was one of them. He was young for a Vraxian officer, only 5 years older than Zektar. He had heard stories about the cub who could beat any human at their own war games. "Show me these human tactics," Korthek said one evening when he found Zektar in the recreation area. Zektar looked up from his handheld gaming device. "You want to learn human games? I want to understand why the hegemony keeps beating us," Korthek replied. "Maybe these human ideas can help." They went to Marcus's apartment. The engineer was happy to teach another Vraxian about strategy games. He set up a multiplayer game where Korthek and Zektar could fight against each other. The result was embarrassing for the experienced officer. Zektar defeated Korthek's army completely in less than 20 minutes. The young cub used a combination of economic warfare, terrain advantages, and psychological tactics that left Korthek completely confused. "How did you do that?" Korthek demanded. "I had more soldiers and better equipment." "You fought like a Vraxian," Zektar explained. "You attacked directly with honor. But I fought like a human. I attacked your resource gatherers first, so you couldn't build more soldiers. I used the mountains to hide my movements. I made you think I was attacking from the east, but my real attack came from the west." Korthek stared at the screen. In traditional Vraxian thinking, he had done everything right. He had been brave, aggressive, and honorable. But he had lost completely to a cub who used strange foreign tactics. "Teach me," Korthek said quietly. Word spread further. More young Vraxian officers came to learn about human strategy games. Marcus's apartment became an unofficial tactical school. Zektar became the teacher, showing older and more experienced warriors how to think beyond traditional Vraxian methods. The breakthrough came when Commander Krixtal visited the mining station. He was a hero of the 3rd Defense Fleet, winner of many battles against pirates and raiders. He had come to investigate reports about Vraxian officers playing with human toys instead of training properly. "This is disgraceful," Commander Krixtal announced when he found 6 Vraxian officers gathered around Marcus's gaming setup. "You shame your ancestors with this weakness. Would you like to test these tactics yourself?" Zektar asked politely. "We could use the station's training simulator." Commander Krixtal's eyes narrowed. The training simulator was used for serious military exercises. It could recreate space battles with realistic physics and weapons. "You wish to challenge me, cub? I wish to demonstrate what human tactical thinking can accomplish," Zektar replied. The next day, half the station gathered to watch the simulation. Commander Krixtal commanded a traditional Vraxian fleet formation. Zektar controlled an identical force, but he planned to use tactics learned from human games. The simulation began with both fleets approaching each other across empty space. Commander Krixtal did exactly what Vraxian tradition demanded. He formed his ships into a battle line and advanced directly toward the enemy. It was brave, honorable, and predictable. Zektar split his fleet into 3 groups. The largest group retreated, making Commander Krixtal think he was winning. The other 2 groups used asteroid fields for cover and approached from the flanks. When Commander Krixtal's ships were fully committed to chasing the retreating group, Zektar sprung his trap. The flanking forces attacked the supply ships and command vessels. Without coordination and support, the main Vraxian battle line fell apart. Commander Krixtal's superior force was defeated in detail, piece by piece. The simulation ended with Commander Krixtal's flagship destroyed, and his entire fleet scattered. The watching Vraxians stood in stunned silence. "Impossible," Commander Krixtal whispered. "You used cowardly tactics." "It is how wars are won," Zektar replied simply. "My father's fleet lost 3 ships to hegemony pirates last month using traditional tactics. In this simulation, I destroyed your entire fleet and lost only 2 vessels. Which approach saves more Vraxian lives?" Commander Krixtal had no answer. The results spoke for themselves. That night, he sent a coded message to Vraxian High Command. The message was short but important. "Request immediate study of human tactical methods. Young officer on Kepler 442b has demonstrated revolutionary approaches to fleet combat." Marcus watched from the observation deck, proud of his student. Zektar had grown from a curious cub into a tactical innovator. But Marcus also felt a little worried. He had taught Zektar these concepts as games and intellectual exercises. Now they were becoming tools of real war. That evening, as they cleaned up the gaming equipment, Zektar asked Marcus a serious question. "Do you think I'm becoming too much like a human?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I think you're becoming something new. You have Vraxian courage and honor, but also human flexibility and strategic thinking. Maybe that's what the galaxy needs right now." Outside the station windows, the stars looked peaceful. But Marcus and Zektar both knew that somewhere among those stars, the hegemony was planning new attacks. Soon, Zektar would have the chance to test his gaming-inspired tactics in real combat. The alarm bells rang through every Vraxian ship in 3 star systems. Emergency lights flashed red as commanders received the terrible news. The Caltharian hegemony had returned with their largest fleet ever seen. 60 warships, hundreds of fighters, and support vessels filled with boarding troops. They were attacking 3 Vraxian border systems at the same time. Captain Morthak stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the enemy approach on his tactical display. The pirates had learned from their previous defeats. Instead of small raids, they now brought overwhelming force. Traditional Vraxian tactics would not work against such numbers. "Sir, High Command requests all available ships to form defensive lines around Mordak Station," his communications officer reported. Morthak nodded grimly. Morthak Station was the most important Vraxian outpost in this sector. It controlled trade routes and mining operations that fed the war effort. If it fell, 3 entire star systems would be defenseless. In the strategy room of Mordak Station, Admiral Rexkar studied holographic displays showing the approaching enemy fleet. 30 years of military experience told him the situation was hopeless. The hegemony outnumbered the defending forces 2 to 1. Their ships were newer and better armed. "We will form a defensive sphere around the station," Admiral Rexkar announced to his officers. "All ships will take positions and fight with honor until the end." "Admiral," a young voice spoke from the back of the room. "May I suggest a different approach?" Every head turned. Zektar stood among the junior officers, still young even by human standards. Most of the senior commanders had never seen him before, but Admiral Rexkar had read Commander Krixtal's report about the young tactician. "Speak, young one," the Admiral said. Zektar stepped forward. His voice was steady despite his nervousness. "The hegemony expects us to defend the station directly. They will attack with their main force while sending smaller groups to destroy our supply ships and support facilities. But what if we don't defend the station at all?" Several officers made sounds of outrage. "Abandon Mordak Station?" Commander Vextar demanded. "That is cowardice." "Not abandon," Zektar explained quickly. "Make them think we're defending it, while actually setting a trap." Admiral Rexkar raised his hand for silence. "Explain your plan." Zektar moved to the holographic display. "We move most of our fleet to hidden positions in the asteroid field here." He pointed to a dense cluster of floating rocks near the station. "We leave only a small force at the station, making it look weak and easy to capture." "And then?" Admiral Rexkar asked. The hegemony will commit their main force to attack the station. When they're fully engaged, we attack from the asteroids. But we don't attack their warships directly. We attack their command ships, supply vessels, and troop transports. Without coordination and support, their main fleet becomes confused and vulnerable. The room was quiet. What Zektar proposed went against every principle of Vraxian military doctrine. But Admiral Rexkar remembered the simulation results that Commander Krixtal had described. This plan requires perfect timing, Admiral Rexkar said slowly. If we attack too early or too late, they will destroy either our hidden fleet or the station itself. Yes, sir, Zektar agreed. We will need to coordinate multiple groups attacking different targets at exactly the right moment. Like a strategy game where you control many units at once, Admiral Rexkar made his decision. We will try this plan. But if it fails, you will answer for the consequences. The next 12 hours were frantic with preparation. Vraxian ships moved to new positions under cover of darkness. The asteroid field became home to hidden squadrons of fighters and destroyers. Mining equipment was converted into improvised weapons. Civilian vessels were disguised to look like military support ships. Zektar worked with each ship captain individually, explaining their role in the overall plan. To Captain Morthak, he said, "Your squadron will attack their communications array. Without communications, their ships cannot coordinate." To Commander Korthek, he explained, "You will target their fuel tankers. Ships cannot fight if they run out of power." To the fighter squadron leaders, he gave specific timing instructions. Wait until you see the enemy command ship turn toward the station. Then attack from 3 different directions at once. When the hegemony fleet arrived, everything looked exactly as they expected. Mordak Station was defended by a small force of Vraxian ships arranged in a traditional defensive formation. The pirates moved forward confidently, planning to overwhelm the defenders with superior numbers. "All ships, attack formation," commanded Warlord Kexthul from his massive battlecruiser. "Destroy those pathetic defenders and claim the station." The hegemony fleet advanced in perfect order. Their warships formed battle lines, while troop transports moved behind them. Command ships coordinated the attack while supply vessels prepared for the victory celebration. Hidden in the asteroid field, Zektar watched the tactical display with intense concentration. Timing was everything. Attack too soon, and the enemy could retreat. Attack too late, and the station would be destroyed. "Enemy fleet at maximum engagement with station defenses," reported the tactical officer. "Command ships are fully committed to the attack," added another voice. Zektar took a deep breath. This was like the most complex strategy game he had ever played, but with real lives depending on his decisions. "All units, execute Plan Asteroid Shell," he commanded. Chaos erupted across the battle space. From 6 different directions, hidden Vraxian forces attacked the hegemony fleet's vulnerable support vessels. Captain Morthak's squadron destroyed the enemy communications array with precise strikes. Commander Korthek's destroyers crippled 3 fuel tankers before the pirates realized they were under attack. Fighter squadrons swarmed the enemy command ships like angry insects. Without communications, the hegemony fleet could not coordinate their response. Individual ships fought desperately, but they had lost their central leadership and support. Warlord Kexthul watched his perfect plan fall apart. "All ships, retreat to secondary positions," he ordered. But his communications were down. Most of his fleet never received the message. The battle that should have lasted hours was over in 47 minutes. The hegemony lost 23 ships and had 15 more severely damaged. The Vraxian defenders lost only 3 ships, and Mordak Station was barely scratched. In the aftermath, Admiral Rexkar studied the battle reports with amazement. 60% enemy losses, with minimal damage to our forces, he said quietly. "In 30 years of warfare, I have never seen results like this." Zektar stood beside him, looking exhausted but satisfied. Human gaming teaches you to think about the whole battlefield, not just individual ships. You attack systems and support structures, not just the biggest targets. News of the victory spread through Vraxian space faster than any ship could travel. The young tactician who had learned warfare from human games became famous overnight. Military academies requested copies of his battle plans. Senior commanders asked for personal meetings, but for Zektar, the most important moment came when his father found him after the battle. "I was wrong about human influence making you weak," Captain Morthok said quietly. "You fought with cleverness and courage together. You saved many Vraxian lives today." Marcus Chen watched the news reports from his apartment on the mining station. His young friend had taken gaming concepts and applied them to real warfare. The results were impressive, but Marcus worried about what came next. Word would spread about Vraxian tactical innovations. The hegemony would adapt and develop new strategies. The war was far from over. That night, Zektar visited Marcus for the first time since the battle. They sat quietly, not playing games for once. "Are you proud of what happened?" Marcus asked. "I am proud that fewer Vraxians died," Zektar replied. "But I am also worried. War is not really like games. In games, when you lose, you just start over. In war, dead soldiers stay dead." Marcus nodded. "That's why good commanders always remember that tactics serve a purpose. The goal isn't to win games. The goal is to protect your people and create peace." Outside, stars filled the sky over the mining colony. Among them, both human and Vraxian fleets prepared for the next phase of an ancient war. But now they had new ideas about how to fight smarter instead of just fighting harder. The greatest battles were yet to come. 2 years had passed since the victory at Mordak Station. The name Gaming Tactician was now known throughout the galaxy. Zektar had been promoted 4 times in rapid succession. At an age when most Vraxians were still learning basic combat skills, he now commanded an entire tactical division. The War College on Vrax Prime had created a new department just for him. Young officers from dozens of species came to study what they called neo-strategic warfare. Marcus had been officially appointed as a cultural advisor, teaching the historical background of human military gaming. "Today we will study the Battle of Kethmar Nebula," Zektar announced to his class of junior officers. The holographic display showed a complex 3-dimensional battle space filled with gas clouds and electrical storms. Lieutenant Yextai, a young Vraxian eager to prove herself, raised her hand. "Sir, our fleet was outnumbered 3-1. How did you achieve victory with such disadvantages?" Zektar smiled. "Who can tell me what human gaming concept applies to this situation?" A Zentaurian officer spoke up. "Economic victory, sir? You attacked their resource base instead of their military forces?" "Correct. But which specific type of economic strategy?" Zektar asked. The students thought carefully. They had all learned to analyze battles like complex strategy games. Finally, a human exchange officer answered. "Speed-run tactics, sir. You achieved victory conditions faster than the enemy expected was possible." "Exactly." Zektar highlighted different sections of the battle display. The hegemony expected a long siege of the Kethmar mining facility. Their fleet was positioned for a months-long blockade. But instead of defending the facility, we captured their forward supply depot in 18 hours. Without fuel and ammunition, their large fleet became useless. The battle had been Zektar's most ambitious operation yet. While hegemony forces surrounded the obvious target, Vraxian strike teams had used the nebula's natural interference to hide their movements. They captured the enemy's main supply base before the pirates realized what was happening. Marcus watched from the back of the classroom, proud of how his former student had grown. Zektar now thought about warfare on a scale that impressed even experienced human generals. But more importantly, he had kept his moral center. Every victory was measured not just in enemy losses, but in friendly lives saved. After class, Zektar and Marcus walked through the Academy's memorial garden. New names were added too often to the walls honoring fallen warriors. "The hegemony is adapting to our tactics," Zektar said quietly. "They're using smaller, faster fleets now. Multiple attacks instead of single large invasions. They're learning to think like gamers too." "That's natural," Marcus replied. "In any competitive game, both sides improve their strategies over time. The key is to stay one step ahead." End quote. They were interrupted by an urgent communication from Fleet Command. Admiral Rex Carr's face appeared on Zektar's personal communicator. Looking worried. "Commander Zektar, we have a crisis situation. The hegemony has launched simultaneous attacks on 5 different systems. Our forces are spread too thin to defend them all effectively. High Command requests your immediate strategic input." Zektar studied the tactical data that Admiral Rex Carr transmitted. The situation was complex. 5 separate hegemony fleets were attacking targets hundreds of light-years apart. Traditional military thinking would require defending each target individually. But there weren't enough ships available. "This is like a real-time strategy game with multiple maps," Zektar said to Marcus. "They want us to split our forces and respond to every threat. But what if we don't play their game?" "What do you mean?" Admiral Rex Carr asked over the communicator. "Instead of defending 5 targets, we attack one target with overwhelming force," Zektar explained. "We choose the most important enemy fleet and destroy it completely. Then we move to the next target before they can react. But that means abandoning 4 of the systems under attack," Admiral Rex Carr protested. "Temporarily, yes," Zektar agreed. "But in gaming terms, we trade short-term losses for long-term victory. We let them capture some territory while we destroy their ability to hold it." The plan that Zektar developed was the most complex operation in Vraxian military history. It required precise coordination across multiple star systems. Fleet movements had to be timed perfectly to avoid detection while maximizing impact. The first target was the hegemony fleet attacking the industrial world of Thexvar. While the pirates focused on capturing factories, the entire Vraxian mobile fleet appeared from hyperspace behind them. The enemy force was destroyed in less than 2 hours. Before the other hegemony fleets could react, the Vraxian fleet had moved to the second target, then the third. Each battle was a repeat of the first: sudden appearance, overwhelming attack, complete victory, immediate departure. The strategy worked because it violated the enemy's expectations. The hegemony had planned for traditional responses to each of their attacks. They never imagined that the Vraxians would abandon defensive thinking entirely. By the time the remaining hegemony fleets realized what was happening, 3 of their 5 attack forces had been destroyed. The survivors retreated in confusion, leaving their captured territories indefensible. The campaign became known as the Speedrun War. Military historians compared it to ancient human strategies like Alexander's conquests or Napoleon's Italian campaigns. The common element was rapid movement and concentration of force at decisive points. But Zektar's greatest innovation came after the military victories. Instead of simply recapturing lost territory, he proposed something unprecedented: a diplomatic gaming approach. "We invite representatives from neutral species to participate in peace negotiations," Zektar suggested to the Vraxian High Council. "But we structure the negotiations like a multiplayer strategy game, where everyone can benefit from cooperation." The idea shocked traditional Vraxian diplomats. Peace talks were normally conducted between enemies, trying to gain advantage over each other. But Zektar suggested treating diplomacy like a cooperative game, where all participants work together to solve common problems. The first test came when the Aquarian Confederacy agreed to mediate between Vraxian and hegemony forces. Zektar proposed dividing disputed territory based on each species' specific needs, rather than simple military conquest. "Vraxians need mineral-rich worlds for industry," he explained to the negotiating teams. "Humans need worlds with specific atmospheric conditions. Caltharians prefer asteroid habitats and gas mining platforms. Instead of fighting over the same territories, we can specialize in what each species does best." The negotiations were complex, but the gaming framework made them manageable. Each species contributed their strengths while receiving what they needed most. Trade agreements replaced territorial disputes. Defensive pacts replaced arms races. Marcus watched these developments with amazement. His young friend had evolved from learning individual tactics to thinking about galactic strategy. The boy who had once struggled with PlayStation controllers now moved fleets like pieces in a cosmic chess game. "You've come a long way from that first storm night," Marcus said one evening as they reviewed diplomatic reports. "I learned something important from human games," Zektar replied. The best victory is when everybody wins something. In zero-sum games, somebody always wants revenge. In positive-sum games, everybody has reasons to keep the peace. News of the diplomatic success spread throughout known space. Other species sent representatives to study Vraxian gaming diplomacy. The War College added new courses in cooperative strategy and multi-party negotiations. But the greatest recognition came from an unexpected source. Warlord Kexthul himself, the Caltharian leader who had opposed Vraxian forces for years, requested a personal meeting with Zektar. They met on a neutral space station, surrounded by diplomats and security officers from multiple species. Kexthul was an intimidating figure, covered in battle scars and ceremonial armor. "You have defeated me repeatedly," the warlord said to Zektar. "But you have also offered my people things that warfare never could. Trade routes, technology exchanges, safe territories for our civilians. Why?" "Because war is a game that nobody really wins," Zektar answered simply. "Even the victor loses people and resources. But cooperation is a game where everybody can gain more than they lose." Kexthul considered this carefully. "You speak truth. My raids brought temporary plunder. But your trade proposals offer permanent prosperity. Perhaps it is time for old warriors to learn new games." The formal peace treaty was signed 6 months later. The ceremony took place in the same auditorium where Zektar had first demonstrated gaming tactics to skeptical military commanders. Representatives from 17 different species attended the signing. That night, Marcus and Zektar sat in the apartment where their friendship had begun. The old PlayStation still worked, though they rarely used it anymore. Zektar had responsibilities that kept him busy, managing peace negotiations and training new officers. "Do you ever regret teaching me about human games?" Zektar asked. Marcus shook his head. "I taught you about strategy and tactics. You taught yourself about wisdom and leadership. That's something no game can provide." Outside the space station, the stars looked the same as always. But now they represented something different. Instead of battlefields and territories to be conquered, they were destinations for trade, exploration, and cooperative ventures between species who had learned to play positive-sum games together. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest gathering in recorded history. Representatives from 43 species filled the great chamber on neutral ground. The reason for the meeting was terrifying. The Caltharian hegemony had built the largest war fleet ever assembled. Supreme Admiral Thexkul stood before the holographic display showing intelligence reports. Her voice was grim as she addressed the council. 3,000 ships, 5 million soldiers, weapons that can crack planets. The hegemony has spent 5 years building this armada in secret. Murmurs of fear rippled through the chamber. Even species that had never fought the hegemony understood what this meant. Such a force could conquer entire sectors of the galaxy. "Where are they going to attack?" asked the Zentorian ambassador. Supreme Admiral Thexkul activated a new display. "Our spies report they are heading for Vrax Prime. The hegemony leadership has decided that Vraxian tactical innovations are too dangerous to allow. They plan to destroy our homeworld as an example to other species." Zektar sat in the tactical advisors section, studying the data with growing concern. He was now Supreme Tactical Commander, the youngest being ever to hold such a rank. But this challenge was beyond anything he had faced before. The numbers were overwhelming. Even if every allied species contributed their entire fleet, they would still be outnumbered 2 to 1. Traditional defensive strategies would result in total defeat. "We need time to evacuate the civilian population," Admiral Rexkar said. "At minimum, we should prepare defensive positions around Vrax Prime." "No," Zektar said quietly. Then, louder, "No. That's exactly what they want us to do." Every head in the chamber turned toward him. "Explain," Supreme Admiral Thexkul commanded. Zektar stood and moved to the central display. "This is like the ultimate strategy game. They have more pieces, better equipment, and the advantage of choosing when and where to attack. If we play defensively, we lose. So we have to change the rules of the game." "What do you propose?" asked the human ambassador. "We attack their homeworld at the same time they attack ours," Zektar said simply. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Impossible. Suicide. Madness. Several ambassadors shouted at once. Supreme Admiral Thexcool raised her hand for silence. Explain your reasoning, Commander. Zektar activated a galactic map. The hegemony has committed their entire military to this attack. That means their home territories are defended only by civilian militias and old reserve ships. If we attack Kalthtar while they attack Vrax Prime, we force them to choose between conquest and survival. But that means abandoning our own homeworld, protested Admiral Rex Carr. Not abandoning. Making it irrelevant, Zektar corrected. In gaming terms, we're creating a race condition. Whoever accomplishes their objective first wins everything. Whoever fails, loses everything. The Aquarian ambassador leaned forward. This strategy requires incredible coordination across hundreds of light years. One mistake in timing destroys both fleets. Yes, Zektar agreed. But it's the only strategy that gives us any chance of victory. And it has one more advantage. It's so crazy that they'll never see it coming. The debate continued for hours. Military commanders argued about logistics, supply lines, and communication delays. Diplomats worried about the political consequences of such an aggressive strategy. Scientists calculated hyperspace travel times and fleet coordination requirements. Finally, Supreme Admiral Thexcool called for a vote. All in favor of Commander Zektar's simultaneous attack strategy. The vote was close, but the strategy was approved. Now came the hardest part, making it work. The next 3 months were a frenzy of secret preparation. Ships from 17 different species gathered at hidden staging points. Communication networks were established using quantum entanglement technology. Supply lines were organized across multiple star systems. Zektar worked 18-hour days, coordinating the most complex military operation in galactic history. He had to manage not just ship movements and battle plans, but also the cultural differences between species who had never fought together before. Human ships excel at electronic warfare, he explained to a mixed species planning committee. Vraxian forces are best for direct assault. Aquarian vessels have the best long-range sensors. Zentorian fighters are unmatched in asteroid fields. Each species contributes what they do best. Marcus had been assigned as cultural liaison between human and alien forces. He watched his former student orchestrate the greatest strategic challenge ever attempted. But he also worried about the enormous pressure on someone still so young. Are you sleeping at all? Marcus asked during one of their brief meetings. Sleep is a luxury we can't afford, Zektar replied, studying fleet deployment charts. If this plan fails, billions of civilians die. I can sleep after we win. The final briefing took place on a massive space station hidden in the neutral zone. Commanders from dozens of species gathered in person and by hologram. Zektar stood before them all, looking small but confident. The hegemony fleet will reach Vrax Prime in 72 hours, he announced. Our attack fleet will reach Kalthtar at the same time. Everything depends on precise coordination. He activated the master battle plan. Phase 1. Human electronic warfare ships disable their early warning systems. Phase 2. Vraxian assault forces attack their military installations. Phase 3. All remaining forces converge on their command centers. We have 6 hours to capture their government before they realize what's happening. What about the attack on Vrax Prime? Asked a Zentorian commander. Automated defenses and civilian evacuation protocols, Zektar replied. We're gambling that we can capture their leadership before they can order the destruction of our homeworld. Admiral Rex Carr looked uncomfortable. You're betting the survival of our entire species on a gaming strategy. I'm betting on something more important than strategy, Zektar said. I'm betting that the hegemony leaders value their own survival more than conquest. When they realize their homes are under attack, they'll recall their invasion fleet to defend their families. The day of the operation arrived with ominous calm. Across the galaxy, 2 massive fleets moved toward their targets. The hegemony armada approached Vrax Prime like an unstoppable wave of destruction. At the same time, the Allied fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of hegemony territory. Zektar commanded the operation from the flagship of the combined fleet, Around him, officers from multiple species worked at their stations. Every screen showed countdown timers measuring the approach to their targets. Human electronic warfare ships report successful penetration of enemy sensor networks, came the first report. Aquarian scouts confirm enemy defenses are minimal, came another. All assault groups in position and ready to attack, reported the Vraxian wing commander. Zektar watched the tactical display with absolute concentration. Everything had to happen in perfect sequence. Too early, and the enemy would have time to respond. Too late, and Vrax Prime would be destroyed. Execute Phase 1, he commanded. Across the Kalthtar system, hegemony warning systems went silent. Human cybernetic specialists had learned their techniques from video game hackers. They shut down communications, confused sensor readings, and made the entire invasion fleet invisible to enemy detection. Execute Phase 2. Vraxian assault forces emerged from stealth positions and attacked military targets throughout the system. Space docks, weapons platforms, and command bunkers came under simultaneous assault. The attacks were swift, precise, and devastating. But the most critical moment came with Phase 3. As Allied forces converged on the hegemony capital world, emergency transmissions finally broke through the electronic warfare interference. On Vrax Prime, the massive hegemony fleet had reached orbital bombardment range. Planetary shields flickered under the assault of thousands of weapons. Automated defenses fought desperately against overwhelming odds. In the Kalthtar system, Allied forces surrounded the hegemony government complex. Kaltharian leaders found themselves trapped between advancing troops and the reality that their entire civilization was suddenly vulnerable. The critical moment came when Overlord Vex Thule, supreme leader of the hegemony, received simultaneous reports from both battle zones. His invasion fleet was minutes away from crushing Vrax Prime, but his own capital was under attack, and his family was in danger. Overlord, we need immediate reinforcement, came desperate calls from Kalthtar. Enemy forces have breached the outer defenses. The government district is surrounded. At the same time, fleet commanders at Vrax Prime reported, planetary shields at 30%. Request permission to begin surface bombardment. Overlord Vex Thule faced the ultimate strategic dilemma. He could complete the conquest of Vrax Prime, but lose his own homeworld. Or he could save his capital, but abandon the greatest military victory in hegemony history. Zektar had counted on this moment of choice. In every strategy game he had ever played, victory came not from superior force, but from forcing the enemy to make impossible decisions. The transmission from Overlord Vex Thule came on all frequencies. All hegemony fleets, return to Kalthtar immediately. Abandon current operations, and defend the homeworld. Across 2 star systems, the greatest fleets in galactic history began to turn away from battle. The hegemony invasion force broke off their attack on Vrax Prime and started the long journey home. But it would take them days to reach Kalthtar. And by then, the war would be over. Within hours, Kaltharian government leaders agreed to peace negotiations. The alternative was the complete destruction of their civilization by the Allied fleet that now controlled their system. The surrender ceremony took place on the same neutral space station where peace talks had been held years before. Overlord Vex Thule signed the treaty that ended the hegemony's centuries-long expansion. In exchange for peace, they would join the galactic community as equals, rather than conquerors. How did you know they would choose to save their homeworld instead of destroying ours? Marcus asked Zektar after the ceremony. Because that's what any player would do in a strategy game, Zektar replied. When you're forced to choose between winning and surviving, most people choose survival. The hegemony leaders are parents and spouses, not just warriors. They couldn't sacrifice their families for conquest. The victory celebration lasted for weeks across dozens of worlds. Zektar was promoted to Grand Admiral, the highest rank in the Allied forces. But more importantly, his strategic innovations had created a template for resolving conflicts without massive destruction. Years later, the war college that bore his name had become the premier institution for strategic studies in the galaxy. Students from hundreds of species came to learn what they called gaming strategy, the art of thinking beyond traditional military concepts. On the wall of the main lecture hall hung a simple plaque that Marcus had suggested. It read, The greatest victory is won before the battle begins. Human military philosophy. As interpreted by Console Gaming. Class of 2387. Marcus visited the college often, now serving as Professor Emeritus of Human Strategic Culture. He still kept his old PlayStation in his office, though it was now considered a historical artifact. During one visit, a young Caltharian student approached him with a question. Professor Chen, did you ever imagine that teaching games to one curious cub would change galactic history? Marcus smiled, remembering that stormy night so many years ago when a frightened young Vraxian had knocked on his door. The best teachers never know where their lessons will lead. We just try to help curious minds learn to think in new ways. Outside the college windows, ships from dozens of species traveled freely between star systems. Trade routes carried goods and ideas instead of weapons and conquest. The galaxy had learned to play cooperative games instead of zero-sum wars. And somewhere in the peaceful stars, former enemies worked together to solve new challenges, guided by the wisdom that the greatest victories come not from defeating others, but from helping everyone win.